8:30. Then he's got to zoom over and do his own show. And we should mention Chris and Key were once teammates in Dallas 2005, Chris's rookie year. Key was just about the end of his stellar career. And now you guys, I just said your stellar career. What did you want me to say there?
The end. It wasn't the end.
Okay.
It was just different chapter in my professional life.
Gotcha.
So this is kind of like old times, Zubin.
You're reunited again.
Yeah, reunited, and it feels so good. The only difference is instead of arguing with Todd Haley, he's arguing with Jay Will, and I'm sure at some point you're going to scream at me about how we need to get the break rather than Mike Zimmer yelling at me about running to the ball. So a little bit different, but still kind of the same.
Yeah, he was just a young kid, big, tall, kind of bow legs, kind of like, big though, really like huge defensive end type, D tackle. He was big, man. That's for damn sure. And young and nice. Didn't say much. Quiet. Just watched, kind of observed. That's why he's talking about the back and forth with Todd Haley. For a rookie, he sees the back and forth. He like, damn, you get to talk to the coaches that way. But it wasn't. It's never like a real argument, so to speak. It's just more about arguing or having a conversation, very animated, Z, about what's going on and taking place at the time.
Well, Zoo, the only reason I was quiet is because vets like Keyshawn, along with Bill Parcells and Todd Bowles and Casey Rogers, they said rookies should be seen and not heard. So when you get that from those guys, are you going to say much in the locker room? Probably not.
Yeah.
But we don't want you to be quiet this morning.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I got this microphone now. Nobody can stop me. I'm all good.
So let's talk about what's all good for the Minnesota Vikings. They have suddenly gone from 1-5 to showing signs of life. They've won 3 games in a row. They are now 4-5. The Bears moving in the opposite direction. They've lost 4 in a row, but let's focus on the positive. Minnesota yesterday, Kirk Cousins finally getting a win on Monday Night Football. And this is a completely different Minnesota
1-9.
1-9. It was his 10th career start on Monday night. Finally gets that first win. And I think finally, Key, Minnesota is starting to look like the team you said they would be at the beginning of the season when you predicted they'd be a division champion.
Well, I did. I thought that they would win the division based on the way that they finished last year and Coach Zim coming back and Kirk Cousins coming back and then moving on from Diggs with drafting Jefferson out of LSU, Dalvin Cook, just the whole thing. And I knew that the secondary would struggle because they would be young. And I thought, at the beginning of the season, it's like, okay, they lost 1. I get it. They lost 2. Uh-oh. They lost 3. You start looking at it like, well, what the hell is wrong with them? Now, all of a sudden, I think Gary Kubiak has settled in as the offensive coordinator now that Kevin Stefanski has gone to Cleveland. Gary Kubiak now steps upstairs, calling the plays and getting back into that groove as an offensive coordinator. Defensively, they've always been a good defense because Mike Zimmer knows how to call defenses. Then the young secondary has settled in to some degree now. And then when you look at them overall, they're still in the mix. You look at the next 3 games that they have coming up, Cowboys to start with, they very well could wind up having this thing go down to the wire to week 15 or 16 before they're eliminated from the playoffs, Chris.
Yeah, Key, you mentioned the Cowboys coming up. They also got the Panthers and the Jags. All 3 of those games are at home. So the Minnesota Vikings have a chance to get healthy, and it seems like this team is headed in the right direction. A few weeks back when they traded Yannick Ngakoue, we thought that they were punting on the season, but Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer had other plans, and now this team seems like they're getting it together. The only concern that I have is that offensive line is still an albatross. They got to get that fixed because the Chicago Bears front 7 dominated that group last night. Dalvin Cook really didn't get going. He wasn't able to have the impact on that game. And then they put a little bit of pressure on Kirk Cousins, although Kirk was getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. But the offensive line is still going to be an issue that the Vikings got to get fixed.
Yeah, but everybody's not running up on the Chicago Bears defensive front, though, right? I mean, everybody doesn't have that defensive front. The Cowboys, the Panthers, the Jags, is that defensive front going to look like Chicago's? So when you start to look at it, yes, the offensive line at times struggled for them, and they didn't get Dalvin Cook going, but the defenses that they're getting ready, especially the Cowboys defense. And then when you dive into the Panthers, are a little bit better defensively, but you start to look at it, you say, well, okay, overall, in 3 phases of the game, the Cowboys aren't better than the Minnesota Vikings. The Jags aren't better than the Minnesota Vikings. Depending on whether or not Teddy Bridgewater is healthy when they played the Carolina Panthers, you never know what you might get out of that. So they certainly, the needle is ticking upward for sure for them. and it's good to see.
No doubt. It's also good to see, at least if you're a Vikings fan, as Key mentioned, Kirk Cousins getting off the schneid on Monday Night Football. I know those famous words. You like that came when he played for the Washington football team, but after last night, I think it's fair to say you like that is back. Here's Kirk.
For me, it's all about, playing well and, doing my part. I've played long enough to know that there's not a lot you can control as a quarterback. There is, the ball's in your hands, but there's so many things out of your control. And so you just do the best you can, play the best you can.
So let's flip it to the other side with Chicago. And by the way, to Chris's point, Dalvin Cook, not great last night, 96 yards, 30 carries. But just a reminder, the previous two games, 206 yards and 163 on the ground. So he's been holding his own for sure.
And a lot of the times when we look at things, and Chris knows this very well, as a defensive lineman or defensive player, you look at the total. First thing we run to is the box score. Oh, man, look at the yards. He had less than 100. How many attempts? How did that play into play action pass? Mm-hmm. What did it do to the linebackers and the defensive linemen? Did it negate them from having a full pass rush? Did it slow them down? And so when you start to look at that, it was very effective in terms of having him on the field, even though yardage-wise he didn't have an explosive game, but it helped the overall game plan. When you got a guy like Kirk Cousins throwing for close to 300 yards and 2 touchdowns and one little interception, I don't really necessarily put that on Kirk Cousins. So when I put that on Thielen's supposed to catch that ball. Mm-hmm. Instead, it bounces off his chest because he's trying to catch the ball with his chest opposed to his hands, and he knows better. And then all of a sudden, it goes the other way for an interception. So when you start to look at it, you go, okay, Kirk Cousins did a pretty good job, but you got to factor in Dalvin Cook's ability to be on the field to give the defense something to look at.
And Chris,
he's definitely a guy that you got to account for, right? Dalvin Cook is going to dictate front and coverage, but I think with the Minnesota Vikings last night, it had more to do with what Gary Kubiak was doing play calling wise and being able to scheme up plays and get the matchups that he was looking for, because they got Buster Screen on Adam Thielen a few times and they took advantage of them. The 2 touchdowns that Thielen caught were on Buster Screen. So I think when you start talking about what Kubiak was doing, I think that had more of an impact than the rush attempts from Dalvin Cook. Because I'm with you. Sometimes with the running game, it's not necessarily about the yards. Yeah. It's about the attempts, and you force the defense to have to account for that. Last night, I thought that game was more about the ineptitude of the Chicago Bears offense, not being able to get anything going and allowing the Minnesota Vikings time to be able to figure out their offense.
In our last minute, fellas, the Bears offense, they made the offensive coordinator switch. Essentially, Matt Nagy was calling the plays the head coach. Instead, it's now Bill Lazor. They have less than 150 yards of offense. Fellas, they had more yards on special teams. They had more yards on special teams than on offense.
They had more points on special teams, too.
Bill waited all this time to call plays and get his opportunity and his chance. Womp, womp, womp.
The Bears are on the bye, and they certainly need it. Much more on the Bears' offensive struggles on Monday night with Jeff Dickerson, our Bears reporter, coming up in 20 minutes. He'll